I'd like to welcome to the stage today's moderator, the DC Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics, Carl Cannon.
All right.
Wow, thanks a lot. I'll never follow you again. Thanks.
Carl.
Thanks, Daryl. Lisa, yeah.
Our second guest is another Congressman Doug Collins. He's another underachiever. Let's see, double major in poli-sci and criminal justice in college. Master's degree in divinity from Baptist Theological Seminary in New Orleans. Pastor for 11 years at a church in his native Georgia. Then state legislature, law school at night. Oh yes, Air Force chaplain, but you get the point. In Congress, he's part of the GOP leadership, member of the House Judiciary Committee and Rules Committee, and vice chairman of the Subcommittee on Courts, Intellectual Property, and the Internet, which is what we're talking about today. I want to pick up what we were talking about at the end there, patent reform. There's, under the America Invents Act, there's been this tension between the courts and the patent office. The court's sort of more into free speech, the patent office more into business, sort of rough orientation, with Congress trying to strike a balance by not stifling creativity, but representing intellectual property rights. And I want to talk to you about how well you think that's been done. Okay.
Look, I want to continue, because I think it's a great discussion to have, and it's one for where we're headed, whether it's, the different parts of what the Internet does, the Internet of Things, just the invasion of patents. But we've also got to look at it from a perspective, I think, that was hit on, that Daryl touched on. And that was, first starting with patent quality. And I think we go back to the original thought of what is patent quality and what does that actual patent mean? Is it broad enough to cover what needs to be covered? And is it specific enough to protect, but not broad enough to capture other things that in the end will stifle innovation from somewhere else? I think what you described was an interesting perspective from the perspective of the courts and in perspective of what Congress is trying to do. And then we'll just take the third group out there, not being the courts or Congress, but the stakeholders. And I think there's been the disconnect here in what we're looking at from the perspective of the stakeholders needing, I'm a firm believer. And
you say stakeholders, inventors and investors?
Inventors, investors, the whole ecosystem that brings up and I agree with Daryl, that we're still the ones that have first thought, is probably the best way to put it. America is still, I believe, the leader in innovation of first thought. We have that first thought that is then, either we take it or others take it as well. When we look at this, we've got to have strong intellectual property protection, because if you do not have that, you very much lose the creative reasoning, if you would. This is the concern that I think Congress is having, is saying, how do we make sure that there's good creative protection while at the same point giving something that businesses then can use and it not be used against them? That's become the tension more, frankly, on the business side of the house of either am I going to get sued for using something I didn't or did not know was a part of, or in the court system. Instead of focusing basically on what I feel is the better part of it, is focusing on how do we make sure that the protection of the thought, the protection of the creator, the protection of that next big thing is something that is then expanded upon so that we can build upon it and use. That's going to be a difficult.
Let me give you an example. So there was an amendment to the patent law in 2011, and this sort of appeals court set up in the U.S. Patent Office. But here, there was a case I was going to use originally to show how the Internet's so dynamic and helps new business. There's a guy, Josh Malone is his name, father of 8 from Plano, Texas. He invents something that can fill 100 water balloons in 60 seconds. He invents it. He files for patent, gets the patent, launches a Kickstarter campaign, raises $1 million online, and he's off and running. But then somebody, not a Chinese company, another American company just builds the same thing. They reverse engineer it, build it. He goes to the patent office, this appellate body in the patent said, nah, your original patent was too vague. This is the kind of thing that stifles innovation. It doesn't create the incentive.
It does.
So does Congress have to tighten these procedures?
I think we're going to have to, but I think it goes back to, it does have to tighten up procedures in the sense of saying, here is the specific, purpose, here's how we tighten them up and say, this is what we mean by this, and there are real consequences to, as you just said, just coming and taking it over. It has always been a tension, whether you go from and this was something I think, let's take it to the next logical step, and that's value. What is the value of this economy that we're in? What is this value of this sort of theoretical, as we talk about intellectual property, we talk about this out there. And I had a group of attorneys that I was talking to one time out on the West Coast, and they were talking about this issue, that this is becoming the big issue for them is when they discuss with venture capitalists and others, what is the value of an algorithm? What is the value of this, different thing? And they said, after they thought about it for a long time, they finally had to come back and say, this is in essence not new, but what all attorneys do is they say there is a correlation, there's something that we can look at. And they go back almost 125 years to when the titans of, quote, traditional industry were going. You had steel, you had, the U.S. Steel, you had the trains, and really at that time it was the Rockefellers, the Morgans, and others who determined what that value was. Where we're struggling right now is to define that value and say if that value comes from this individual piece, his patent, or does it come from the whole. I think that's the struggle for Congress, because then you have to take into another piece that we really haven't talked about, and that is the schools. That is where some of the best work is being done now. How do they play into this market and protecting their portfolio and getting it to the market, but still having the protections of both? I think that's the struggle for Congress. And it's hard because at another point in time, you also have others who say, well, this is mine, I want to be able to sue for this, or you're doing. So this is, for Congress to simply say, here is X, it's going to be very difficult.
Well, let me bring music into it. So
yes.
I love music. I have Pandora, I have a Spotify account, I have Apple Music access, I have even Sirius XM radio because I bought a new car. So I have a vested interest in this next question, but would the proposed Music Modernization Act do what it's intended to do? I mean, I love access to all my music sources, but I don't want to rip off musicians. Have we finally, it's got 73 Senate co-sponsors, but we finally got something that we've figured this out on music?
I believe so. It is some. This is, by the way, Music Modernization Act is the bill that I've been working on. It started off as a Songwriter Equity Act. It's morphed into, with my partner Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem and I, in the intellectual property space, Hakeem and I have, still going back to the Defending Trade Secrets Act, which you had mentioned something about how do we protect. The Defend Trade Secrets Act is something that's really helped on that trade secret front. That is something Congress has done, and that was our bill. Cloud Act, other things. And Hakeem and I have been working on music for about 5 years now. For those who believe that Congress is a place where, I am so tired of a world in which bumper stickers are the mentality. I am sick of it. Bumper stickers only do one thing. They don't give you an answer, and they make everything sticky on the other side. That's all they do. And they don't help. And what we've got now is everybody just wanting to fix this, like I want my music, I want to download it, I don't want to pay for it, this whole idea. What Music Modernization does is take everybody. We finally got all stakeholders, from digital, the disruptors who gave that ability to take out a phone and listen to music anywhere you want to, instead of like I did when I was growing up. I had to wait for the song to come back on there. Oh, here it is, and you push the cassette tape to maybe catch it so you could listen to it again. If you were too cheap to have 99 cents to go buy the single. For those of you, that's that little thing. Okay, never mind. Anyway, we work on it. So I think what we're getting now is finding that ecosystem that when the disruptors, who at one point were struggling to find that new, dealing with the creative and getting them paid, that's where the balance is struck. And I think what the Music Modernization Act gives us the ability to do is, number one, is have transparency on who owns. That's a big issue that's not talked about a lot. It gives the benefit of who owns the product, lets that then be run through a cooperative that allows them to get paid. And at the end of the day, it keeps us out of court, and instead of Spotify having to spend its time in court trying to fend off suits or pay out big settlements, they're able now just to put the money where it belongs, and I think that's a good thing for both sides.
You mentioned Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He's a Democrat, liberal
Yes.
Democrat. You work with him on another bill I want to ask you about called the First Step Act.
Yes.
This is criminal justice. It's not tech per se, but you dubbed the act the art of the possible, and that got me to thinking. I mean, other things, this bill would expand vocational educational opportunities to federal inmates. But it reminded me of something. We've been talking in the earlier thing we did with Google and today with Darrell Issa about internet access in rural areas and how important it is. But I'm wondering about, it's not a broadband access question per se, but I wonder if there aren't other psychic barriers to using the digital economy in in America's inner cities. Is this a problem? Does Congress have a role? Yeah,
I believe they do. And I think here's the issue with this, because broadband and the access, the ability to access broadband, the access to the internet, we talk about it as a digital divide. Actually, it's a dream divide. I believe truly this is something, this is that next generation of really the dream. And I explain it this way. When I was a kid, for me, my dad was a state trooper. We didn't go a lot of places. He was always working. But I had books and I had the radio and I had, so I read and I listened, and it brought the world to me. I was one of those crazy kids that when you were bored, they bought a World Book Encyclopedia, and I'd actually go read. I'd just pick up P and just find out what's going on in the world and learn. Nowadays, my kids who are in the University of Georgia, one's an engineer, one's in political science, they can go literally to their phone and look up anything at that moment. If you don't have that ability, it's now come to the point, especially with the way that the world is developing, there's digital deserts, if you would, in not only, we think about it like in districts like I have. I have a very suburban southern piece, but I have a very agricultural area.
Northeastern Georgia.
Northeastern Georgia. Right now it looks like where the hurricane's going to end up at the end of the weekend. We don't want it to come visit personally, but if it does, we're in the mountains. So we got a lot of hard connections to make because we have a rural area, but we also have mountains. So we have to look at, digital, the point-to-point spectrums. It doesn't matter. How do we get it there? Because in my district, you can go 20 miles and you're in Atlanta with every access to everything, or you can go 5 miles and not be able to access your own office. For us, working with the broadband economy, working with this, it's one thing we did called a Gigabyte Opportunity Act, in which Chairman Pai has also jumped into. Shelley Moore Capito has it in the Senate.
Ajit Pai, the FCC chairman.
Yes, Ajit Pai has been very supportive of, and saying, look, here's ways that the states, because one thing we don't need is a national, here's what we're going to do at this point, because you're overstepping. I think there's ways that we can help, because frankly.
I want to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is access to broadband and the internet essentially a right for American children? Because if it is, maybe Congress does have a role.
Yeah, I worry about how we throw the word right around. That is my concern there. Is it something that I believe that we should have access to, and there should be, that government, here's my problem. Government should not be the inhibitor in rural areas or urban areas to having access to the ability to get a gigabyte economy.
Right,
and that's where we're at.
But I'm asking, should government require it?
Require it?
You use that phrase, dream divide, in your district.
It is a dream divide, but I think there's, again, my only concern is, without just simply saying, yes, everybody ought to have it, I think from my sort of more small government conservative side, is it ways that we can remove the government equation here and allow it to happen in things, in ways that we have seen in this room, whether it be the internet economy with Google, with others, the digital, the disruptor technology. Let's let them be able to have that technology without government giving an artificial deadline and saying, here's where we're going to do it. I think if we do that, and that's what my Opportunity Act does, it simply says with the state legislatures, the governors, all says, here's the areas where we have a problem. We're going to give you, issue on your capital gains. If you reinvest in broadband, we're going to let you, have divestment. That allows them to go into those areas and do that.
All right, we've got another panel here, so I'm going to
Hi, panel.
Open it for questions. And just raise your hand. Somebody will come with a microphone. There's a question here, Zach, Evan, and oh, we got the mic over here? Sorry. Okay.
And we're all open to like SEC football questions.
I got one while we're waiting. So Burt Reynolds, is he still popular, smoking a bandit up in your district?
Well,
that was
okay.
what it was.
All right, yeah, I understand.
It's 30 seconds.
For 30 seconds, Smoking the Bandit is not a movie, it's a documentary. It was made in my district, okay? As you go along, you have to understand also for those, again, very proud of this in a sense of commercial. Anybody ever seen the movie Deliverance? Remember the young man who played the banjo? He still lives in my district and works at Walmart.
No kidding.
Kid you not. At least that's what I was told last time. He was actually working at Walmart and Home Depot up in Raven County.
In your opinion, what needs to be done to improve the business case for rural broadband deployment, just overall?
The business case for that, I think the biggest thing is going back and how it affects is the concern is making sure that the access is there. And I think the one thing I will say that maybe from a governmental perspective, we've got to make it easier to get like venture capital, and we've got to make sure that there are more direct grant stuff going to that issue. I have a huge problem with the CAF fund, with the Connect America Fund, which only the bigger companies get, and I apologize to anybody, but I've got a company in my Windstream in my area that is absolutely just dropped the ball. They fumble, they're not working it, they only re-put what they need to into the areas that make them money, then they use the money to go compete with the Comcast and the AT&T of the world. They have failed miserably in my district. They know my feelings, so you don't have to go tell them. They're not real happy with me, and that's fine, because they're failing my people. That's where we got to do a better job in saying, let's do it, let's don't make it where one company can monopolize all the funds. Let's be able to get it to a smaller companies who can do the smaller WISPs, who can do those things that give a point-to-point that they don't have right now. That's where business needs to be from a governmental perspective.
Who else? All right.
Lunch has been really good. And
I'll leave you one thought that this coal miner I keep mentioning, Rusty Justice, he bought a building in Pikesville. And the building he bought, he told us the only reason he bought it because there was a pole out front that had internet. That's why he bought the building. He didn't even look at the building. Oh, this is what I need. That's how essential this is to business development in rural areas.
Well, it can be. Think about it. One of the things I talk about in my area, if you look at my area, it's the Northeast Georgia, but I've got part of my district is the University of Georgia. I've got the North Georgia, University of North Georgia, where I went to school. You got the new Cyber Center, which is just in Augusta, which is about 60 miles south of where we're at. NSA is there. When you start looking at that, one of the things I tell and Emory and others, and I tell the presidents of these colleges, I said, look, you talk about being, the next business incubators. You want to be that always learning. Until we actually partner with the communities, until you start seeing, like, they always talk about Silicon Valley, these other places, or they talk about Research Triangle in North Carolina. Until you start seeing the professors working 12 hours a day, going home, taking students, and they go home and they get in their garage and then they're making what they're talking about, and you start having this entrepreneurial spirit, which is dependent upon having that issue. Location in rural areas is not about real estate anymore. It's about the access, and that's why we've got to make, whether businesses, whether it be people, having that connection.
All right, last question. Again, we are Real Clear Politics. You're running to be the next House Judiciary Committee Chairman?
Yes.
So that's contingent, among other things, on Republicans keeping control of that chamber. I assume
that would be contingent, yeah.
Assume as a former pastor you're not a betting man, but what odds would you give to that proposition?
Well, we have it 5-1 under spread with over 100, but no, I've never bet before. Some of you on the Baptist side will get that. I do dance as well, not well, but I think we do. I think it's going to be tighter as we go forward. I think the interesting issue is, and I travel the country, and that's one of the things that I'm, that's something I want to be as chairman of the judiciary, but right now it's just about keeping majority for all the stuff that we have been able to do, especially in the intellectual property front. We've done more in the last few years on that front from the Republican majority perspective than had been done in years previous. And this administration, frankly, for whatever you may think, and people do have adult opinions about this administration, the one thing this administration gets is branding, trademark, and intellectual property. The president understands it, and his folks do. We're making progress. I think we keep it. It's going to be quiet. Outside of this area, where everybody talks about it in vague terms, it's muddled. But you get out, and I've been in West Virginia, I've been in California, I've been in Washington State, I've been all over in Nevada. Economy, progress, jobs are making a big difference. Is it going to be tight? Yes. But
all
I
right.
think we can.
Yes or no question, as they say in the Senate Judiciary Committee, to this question.
So I filibuster.
Yeah. Either way, as chairman of the Judiciary, ranking member, do you expect to be fending off Democrats' attempts to impeach the president in 2019?
I think that's become their choice. They've decided to run on several things that have played to a base that they're continuing to. Yes, I believe that'll be a continuation of their discussion. I think we'll keep majority, so it'll just be their talking point. I think we'll have that. I think what we'll see is, I'm hopeful, at least a small turn after this election when we are able to keep both the House and Senate, we continue that there'll then be a turn maybe in 6 to 8 months or short or longer to the 2020, and maybe it'll be moved toward that.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I hope that you'll join me in thanking the Congressman.
Thank y'all so much. We enjoyed it. Y'all have a good day.